serpent in the sky, the high wisdom of ancient Egypt.
You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. So we are going to continue our in-depth look at Serpent in the Sky by John Anthony West. But before that, as always, we'll have Space Weather News, and we'll talk to the Watcher, and I think Kyle's got a couple of stories. We're going to do those astronomy stories?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And we got listener communications about the last show and other stuff, so it's going to be a great show. But first, as always, let's introduce our good friend and longhead, Mr. Brett England, from deep beneath his secret space station in secret outer space, the Watcher. What's up, buddy?
Super excited for the continuation, man. I don't ever have to read books. I just wait till we do this.
That's the same boat I'm in.
I feel like I'm doing all the work here.
Yep.
Oh well.
We're just along for the ride.
You couldn't do all this work without us.
That's right. I couldn't do this podcast with the very little amount of work that you guys put in without it. All right. Let's go ahead and do a space weather news from spaceweather.com. Coming soon, a sunset conjunction. Planets are gathering in the sunset sky. During the third week of November, Venus and Jupiter will converge for a beautiful conjunction above the southwestern horizon, only 1.4 degrees apart on November 24th. Then a whisper-thin crescent moon will join them, forming a celestial triangle on November 27th and 28th. Do not miss it. I've noticed that. Like right at the evening after the sun goes down, you can see the planets are kind of close to each other up there. They're kind of in a line.
Oh, yeah.
That's been pretty cool. They're getting closer. It's Jupiter and Venus. Also, noctilucent clouds are forming over Antarctica. The southern season for noctilucent clouds is underway, according to new observations from NASA's AIM spacecraft. On November 15th, AIM detected a small cloud over eastern Antarctica, reports Cora Randall of the University of Colorado's Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space Physics. This is the earliest we have seen NLCs appear since the AIM mission began in 2007. Note the electric blue puff over the Drawning Maudland in this image taken by AIM's CIPS instrument. Yeah, there's a picture here, which you guys can find at spaceweather.com. NLCs are Earth's highest clouds. They form around the poles when summertime water vapor billows up into the high atmosphere, crystallizing around specks of meteor smoke at the edge of space. Antarctic NLCs typically appear in mid to late November. This year's early apparition on November 15th breaks the earlier mark of November 17th set in 2013 and 2016. If history is any guide, that little puff of blue is about to expand dramatically. Previous data from the AIM spacecraft show that noctilucent clouds are like great geophysical light bulbs. They turn on late in spring, in this case, austral spring, and reach almost full intensity over a period of no more than 5 to 10 days. A week from now, the entire South Pole could be ringed by electric blue clouds. Stay tuned.
Awesome.
Yeah. Let's see. So I found out an interesting thing about the current conditions here. It's actually up to date practically to the second. It's constantly being... So every time I refresh the website, it changes, which means... Like, I don't know how accurate our data has been previously because it could have been from when I looked at the website earlier that day. So let's see. Right now it says, or when I pulled it up earlier, it said the current conditions are solar wind speed 353.3 kilometers per second, and the density is 3.8 protons per cubic centimeter. Now let me refresh and see if it changes. Yeah. Now it says solar wind speed is 356.3 kilometers per second, and the density is 4.5 protons per cubic centimeter.
I knew it. I knew it was fluctuating more rapidly.
All right. What else we got? Should I go ahead and do the All the listener stuff, and we'll do the news stories afterwards?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I lost that, like, I couldn't bookmark the second story. This website wouldn't let me do it.
Oh, well, you're going to have to do it one link at a time.
One link at a time.
From the Voxer, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, we got one review on iTunes Reviews. It's called Catching Up Too Quickly. This is from Fangirl via Apple Podcasts from the United States. Found your podcast a while back and have really grown to love it and all the laughter. Listening to the backlog and the new shows as they come out. Whatever happened to the Mind the Hive website? Tried to go to it, but it appears shut down. Snakes! Yeah, so I don't know what happened to Mind the Hive. We were in communication with those guys, and we got them on the show, and they were real enthusiastic about everything, and then their website went down, and I told them about it, and they said, oh, yeah, we'll get it fixed, and it just never happened, and I don't know. Never heard from them again, so don't know what that was about, but I think there was a group of friends in college together, and they kind of, I don't know, maybe they just moved on? I have no idea. It's too bad, because the website was great, so
Yeah.
all that's left of it on the internet are our readings of the stories. There you go.
Archive.
That's right. Okay, let's see. Got emails here. All right. So this is from Corey. This is called Fucking Done, Guys. It says, what's up, Snicky boys? Don't regurgitate Randall's epic response to the question, what's up, from, I believe, episode 2 or 3 of Cosmographia, please. Yes, not only am I 3 weeks into Snicky Bros and up to snuff, but I'm also up to date on Cosmographia. Y'all need to quit your jobs and podcast full time. It is so goddamn enjoyable. I love how you guys understand that speculation should be placed higher in importance than what can be proved scientifically. And okay, so I should stop this and say that he wrote a second email saying, hey, I was a little drunk when I wrote that. And I didn't mean it in the way that came out. That what he meant was speculation is great, but it's not higher in importance. So,
Okay.
Yeah. It's not higher in importance than what can be proved scientifically. What he meant was that it's great that you'll speculate on stuff that hasn't been proved scientifically.
Yeah.
Okay. And he was a little drunk. So he says, we as humans have such a small understanding of the concept of proof, but there is somehow such a precedence placed on stuff we can see. The arrogance of our modern people is outstanding. Keep up the good work, guys. Snakes! P.S. Thanks for the shout-out, gents, and I highly recommend you look into Stephen Quayle's work. Although he's a bit too religious, he goes over some very interesting stuff. P.S.S. Everyone who suggested Matt LaCroix, I second that opinion. Super thought-provoking and very in-depth research regardless of validation or not. Love you guys. Get back to work. Love ya. Love ya. Always have.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. Let's see. What do we got here?
If we quit our jobs, then everything would die.
Yeah, we can't quit yet. Not yet.
Well, that's not true, but we'd really leave the team in a bad spot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay. This is from Brandon. He says, Snake Bros, that last episode on John Anthony West's Serpent in the Sky was amazing. I find myself jonesing for more of your content as soon as the episodes are over. I had to rewind and listen to the modern interpretation of John 1:1 a few times. That's the in the beginning was the word.
Yeah.
That was so cool. So he agrees with Kyle. And I kind of agree with him too. That verse has interested me for years. I learned it as a kid in Sunday school. Then after I became an engineer and started to understand the universe as vibration, it felt like there was more to those words. Then John Anthony West broke it down like a physicist boss. That was seriously mind-bending. Please keep up the great work, as I'm sure those books are daunting to make it through. It's fantastic. I think I'm going to have to buy that book. Looking forward to the next episode in the series. I'm going to be upping my monthly donation. We got to get you snakes to them pyramids. Much love and appreciation, Brandon. And he did. I noticed that, Brandon. Thank you. Up to your game on Patreon. Really appreciate that.
yeah, he's going to get that book.
Yeah, he's going to get it.
Especially if we make a joke. That you need to read that book in order to get the context.
That's right. All it takes is one joke, and he's like, I got to listen to the whole book so that I can understand the joke.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right, last one here. This is from Birch. Birch again. Says, Dear Snake Bros, I am halfway through your latest and had to pause it. 1, this is the core shit, and I want to dedicate my ears to it, so need a deposit to prepare my ears. 2, I had to write a letter to you all. So here it goes. I find myself wanting to put into words what for you guys made you speechless. How is it that two brothers who talk about wanting to go straight to pyramids can pull a brother back from the brink? So he's talking about
Ryan.
the Ryan email.
Yeah.
And how it made us speechless, which it did. First off, being speechless at this occurrence and the thanks that you have received for it shows both of you, your humility. But that isn't it. That isn't why you are able to have this profound effect on people. Your courage in seeking the truth, in having open minds and hearts as to what the truth may mean to you and to your friends, family, and your listeners, and what the truth may or may not do to what you may or may not have thought you are. The truth, it's a twisty path, is it not? And your skill. In the episode where you spoke of your learning process because someone asked you to lay it out, it wasn't easy, was it? To put into steps how you learn. Well, that is because learning can't be taught. Learning is a thing that we as humans do naturally, and it is beaten out of us at school. Thanks to all that is holy, you guys didn't go to school. If one wants to learn a thing, one must simply go after a cluster of information that represents a certain discipline and devour it. I am at risk here of appearing to try to sound cool, and that is not my intention. I am trying to show how cool you guys are. Your honesty. The way you approach a new subject or book or a set of information is as a clean slate, a wet slab of clay, and stylus. There is no sense of putting on airs, no affectation. This is clear to us listeners, but maybe not to Brett. Again, I don't want to give the impression that I want to outdo other listeners in their praise of you in the show. I think it is important to say these things in order to arrive at, well, let's keep going. So both of you, your humility, your courage, your skill, your honesty, none of these things are the why you have a positive effect on your listeners. Now, I am not religious per se, but we have to use words, and these are the words that are required. It is the why is that you guys bring heaven down to earth. I think a lot of us, the Snake Force, know or at least suspect that heaven and earth are one. But creativity is the process of sharing that truth with others. It is the intent combined with the action that results in the emanation of good vibes that we all tune in for. I have been putting off another letter to you because I have been telling myself that I have more important shit to do. I even told myself that I would write this one later, but then I realized, not in small part to Snake Bro influence, that inspiration is the call to act. I felt this was important, so here you go. You are effing welcome. I am welcome. You are thank you. Yeah, thanks. Best, Birch. Thanks, buddy. Wow. And at the end of the email, it says, this message contains confidential and privileged material for the sole use of the intended recipients. Any review, use, distribution, or disclosure by others is strictly prohibited. If you are not the intended recipient or authorized to receive for the recipient, please contact the sender by reply email and delete all copies of this message. It really does say that at the end. So, yeah.
All right. We won't share that.
We won't share this, Birch. Thanks, buddy.
Man,
all right. Watcher wants to hop in. Yeah, come on, man.
First, that was deep, profound, and he's half right. It's not that it doesn't occur to me. It's that I've spent so many wasted hours trying to explain to you guys why you're awesome and different, and you're just like, oh yeah, that's cool. Anyway, back to what I was saying. So now it doesn't
pyramids
register anymore.
Yeah, I don't know if he was just giving you shit because we do all the time. That's probably what it was.
That's a great precedent. I hope that catches. God damn it.
The great thing is that you can handle it.
Yeah.
So it's fun.
Yeah. It doesn't even affect you. It's just like, you're like, what was that?
Atlas was capable of holding the world on his back. It didn't mean that he wanted to. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But it's like, water off it's whatever the saying is.
It's just water off the Brett's back.
Yeah, water off Brett's back. Well,
hey, man.
Yeah, Birch. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't know what else to say, but thanks.
Let's see. I'm looking through here. The bringing heaven down to earth, I think that's really cool. Like, yes, the whole idea of as above, so below, and that heaven and earth are one. And what we're trying to do is share with all of you our just absolute enjoyment of doing this, not just podcasting, but exploring these mysteries. So if that's a way of bringing heaven to earth, then yes, that's what we're doing. We have had a blast, and with the Watcher as well. Brett has been involved in these conversations with us for years, so we have all had a blast exploring these topics, and so bringing our joy of exploring these topics to all of you is part of what we're doing with the podcast. So yes,
and then finding out that you guys enjoy it is just
yes, 100%
doubly
gratifying.
amazing, and gratifying. Yeah, it's like,
except for that one guy.
There's like a, initially when we were starting the show, it's like we obviously really enjoy talking about this stuff, and so there's the idea that other people will enjoy it, but when it actually happens, it's still kind of mind-blowing, mind-boggling or humbling, or
that's right.
It's all of those things. So
yeah,
it's really cool.
It is.
And it's as the numbers climb, the where we're looking at the metrics of the podcast and we're seeing it climb, we're like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So
how is this happening?
but it's for me personally, if there was no feedback, it would be more difficult to imagine, like, okay, I'm sitting here recording this podcast, but it's actually there's this audience out there, however many people it is, but as the numbers grow, it's like sometimes kind of daunting. You're like, whoa.
Yeah. Are we really talking to that many people?
Yeah. And then if there wasn't any feedback, well, I should just put it this way. It's like to try to not to change the way I act or what I might say just because the audience is growing.
Yeah.
Is difficult. It's like, no, I need to just be myself and
just 100%.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm dumb. But the feedback really helps like get a sense of who you guys are.
Yeah.
And it seems like we're all like-minded, and that makes it way easier to just continue, just like we were all at a party, just hanging out, having a discussion, being totally normal.
Yes.
So it's really great.
And
thanks a lot.
Yeah. And the idea is we wanted to join the discussion, and you guys giving us feedback, sending us emails or commenting on the website or whatever is part of that. It is the discussion. This is why we read the emails and the other communications on the show, because we want to talk with you guys. I mean, I know it's mostly us talking with each other, but we're talking to you. And so when you talk to us, that's great. That's exactly why we, it's exactly one of the reasons why we started doing this, because we want to talk to many people about these topics, and we love hearing you guys' take on it and your take on the show. So,
yeah.
All right.
Great stuff.
You good to go?
Yeah.
Yeah. Stories?
Yeah. All right. So who sent us these stories?
Shank from Twitter.
All right. Great set of stories here from astronomy.com. First story. A close call of 0.8 light years. Astronomers have identified the closest known flyby of a star to our solar system. A group of astronomers from the U.S., Europe, Chile, and South Africa have determined that 70,000 years ago, a recently discovered dim star is likely to have passed through the solar system's distant cloud of comets, the Oort cloud. No other star is known to have ever approached our solar system this close, 5 times closer than the current closest star, Proxima Centauri. Eric Memehik from the University of Rochester in New York and his collaborators analyzed the velocity and trajectory of a low-mass star nicknamed Schultz's star. The star's trajectory suggests that 70,000 years ago, it passed roughly 52,000 astronomical units away, or about 0.8 light years, which equals 5 trillion miles. This is astronomically close. Our closest neighbor star, Proxima Centauri, is 4.2 light-years distant. In fact, the astronomers explained that they are 98% certain that it went through what is known as the outer Oort cloud, a region at the edge of the solar system filled with trillions of comets, a mile or more across, that are thought to give rise to long-period comets orbiting the Sun after their orbits are perturbed. The star originally caught Memehek's attention. I think I'm pronouncing that name right. I don't know. Memejek? Memejek. Or Memehek. Anyway, they caught this guy's attention during a discussion with Valentin D. Ivanov from the European Southern Observatory. Schultz's star had an unusual mix of characteristics. Despite being fairly close, only 20 light-years away, it showed slow tangential motion, that is, motion across the sky. The radial velocity measurements taken by Ivanov and collaborators, however, showed the star moving almost directly away from the solar system at considerable speed. Quote, "Most stars this nearby show much larger tangential motion," said Memejek.
Said that guy.
Yeah, said that guy. The small tangential motion and proximity initially indicated that the star was most likely either moving towards a future close encounter with the solar system, or it had recently come close to the solar system and was moving away. Sure enough, the radial velocity measurements were consistent with it running away from the sun's vicinity, and we realized it must have had a close flyby in the past, end quote. To work out its trajectory, the astronomers needed both pieces of data, the tangential velocity and the radial velocity. Ivanov and collaborators had characterized the recently discovered star through measuring its spectrum and radial velocity via Doppler shift. These measurements were carried out using spectrographs on large telescopes in both South Africa and Chile, the Southern African Large Telescope, SALT, and the Magellan Telescope at Las Campanas Observatory, respectively. Once the researchers pieced together all the information, they figured out that Schultz's star was moving away from our solar system and traced it back in time to its position 70,000 years ago, when their models indicated it came closest to our sun. Until now, the top candidate for the closest flyby of a star to the solar system was the so-called rogue star, HIP long number, which was predicted to come close to our solar system 240,000 to 470,000 years from now. However, Memejek and his collaborators have also demonstrated that the original distance to HIP long number was likely underestimated by a factor of 10. At its most likely distance of about 200 light years, HIP long number's newly calculated trajectory would not bring it within the Oort cloud. Memejek worked with former University of Rochester undergraduate Scott Barenfeld to simulate 10,000 orbits for the star, taking into account the star's position, distance, and velocity, the Milky Way galaxy's gravitational field, and the statistical uncertainties in all of these measurements. Of those 10,000 simulations, 98% of the simulations showed the star passing through the outer Oort cloud, but fortunately, only one of the simulations brought the star within the inner Oort cloud, which could trigger so-called comet showers. While the close flyby of Schultz's star likely had little impact on the Oort cloud, Memejek points out that other dynamically important Oort cloud perturbers may be lurking among nearby stars. The recently launched European Space Agency Gaia satellite is expected to map out the distances and measure the velocities of 1 billion stars. With the Gaia data, astronomers will be able to tell which other stars may have had a close encounter with us in the past or will in the distant future. Currently, Schultz's star is a small dim red dwarf in the constellation Monoceros, about 20 light-years away. However, at the closest point in its flyby of the solar system, Schultz's star would have been a 10th magnitude star, about 50 times fainter than can normally be seen with the naked eye at night. It is magnetically active, however, which can cause stars to flare and briefly become thousands of times brighter. So it is possible that Schultz's star may have been visible to the naked eye by our ancestors 70,000 years ago for minutes or hours at a time during rare flaring events. The star is part of a binary star system, a low-mass red dwarf star with mass about 8% that of the Sun, and a brown dwarf companion with a mass about 6% that of the Sun. Brown dwarfs are considered failed stars. Their masses are too low to fuse hydrogen in their cores like a star, but they are much more massive than gas giant planets like Jupiter. The formal designation of the star is WISE. J-O, really long number. But it has been nicknamed Schultz's star to honor its discoverer, astronomer Ralph Dieter Schultz of the Leibniz Institute for Astrophysique, Potsdam, in Germany, who first reported the discovery of the dim nearby star in late 2013. The WISE part of the designation refers to NASA's Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer, WISE, mission, which mapped the entire sky in infrared light in 2010 and 2011. And the J number part of the designation refers to the star's celestial coordinates. So
Cool. So, yeah, Watcher's saying you're saying that guy's name right, according to howtopronounce.com. Mamajek.
Jack or Mamahek? Okay, Mamajek. All right. Thanks, bro.
Yeah.
All right, so companion story.
0.8 light years is pretty close for another star.
Yes. All right. Also from astronomy.com, wandering star shook up the prehistoric solar system. 70,000 years ago, a nomadic star came within a light year of the sun, likely sending dozens of comets and asteroids tumbling out of the solar system. Around 70,000 years ago, a supervolcano named Toba erupted, blowing roughly 670 cubic miles of vaporized rock and debris into the air. This is thought to have caused a massive struggle for humanity, ultimately leading to a population bottleneck that whittled down our numbers to as few as 1,000 reproductive adults. According to a 2015 study, during this pivotal point in human history, a small reddish star also was likely passing within a light year of the sun, just skimming the outer rim of the Oort cloud, the extended shell of over 1 trillion icy objects that is thought to cocoon the outer solar system. Previously, astronomers believed that this wandering star, dubbed Schultz's star, passed relatively peacefully by the Oort cloud, influencing very few, if any, outer solar system objects. But, according to a new study, researchers now think that the Schultz's star may have caused more of a ruckus than we initially gave it credit for. In the study, published February 6th in monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society, letters, researchers analyzed the orbital evolution of 339 known minor objects like asteroid and comets with hyperbolic orbits that will eventually usher them out of the solar system. By running full in-body simulations, which I don't really know what that is, but in-body simulations, with these objects in reverse for 100,000 years, the team was able to accurately estimate the point in the sky where each body appears to have come from. Surprisingly, the team found that over 10% of the objects, 36, originated from the direction of the constellation Gemini. This spot in the sky also happens to be exactly where astronomers would expect objects to come from if they were nudged by Schultz's star during its close pass 70,000 years ago. Using numerical simulations, we have calculated the radiance or positions in the sky from which all these hyperbolic objects seems to come, said lead author Carlos de la Fuente Marcos, an astronomer at the Complutense University of Madrid, in a statement. In principle, one would expect those positions to be evenly distributed in the sky, particularly if these objects come from the Oort cloud. However, what we find is very different. A statistically significant accumulation of radiance, he said. The pronounced overdensity appears projected in the direction of the constellation of Gemini, which fits the close encounter with Schultz's star. In addition to finding evidence that Schultz's star had an ancient interaction with the Oort cloud, the team also determined that 8 of the objects they studied, including the recent interstellar visitor Oumuamua, are traveling so quickly that they likely originated from outside the solar system. Furthermore, these 8 objects all have radiants that are relatively well separated from the others, which suggests their orbital paths are unique and uncorrelated. 2 of these objects might have extreme velocities of around 9,000 miles per hour, which strongly indicates they are interstellar objects zipping through our solar system. Although more research is needed to confirm the study's findings, the results show that astronomers may not need to wait to study an interstellar object until it serendipitously slingshots around the sun like Oumuamua did. Instead, statistical studies like this could be used to help astronomers proactively identify the most likely extrasolar visitors for future analysis. So that's that's really awesome.
Yeah. But the main point I thought was interesting there was that Schultz's star, in coming that close 70,000 years ago, may have nudged the Taurid object in, because it's supposed to have rolled in 50,000 years ago and started to break up.
Enki?
Yeah. Well, Enki is a remnant of it, yeah.
Yeah.
But that fits the timeline.
Yeah. It's also crazy that there's like at the same time that the star comes really close, some massive volcano goes off.
Right, yeah.
Nearly wipes out humanity.
Yeah, that is a little strange. Strange.
I mean, it would be, I guess, I don't know how long it would take if, say, this star came in 70,000 years ago and nudged something, like how many thousands of years would it take it to get to Earth?
Yeah, long time.
But it's still sort of a rough estimate that it's 70,000 years ago when this volcano went off. Also, when the star came in, it could be within a few thousand years. Perhaps, I don't know.
Yeah,
but that's
wild.
Yeah. Really
but if that ends up being the case, it may be that the Younger Dryas stuff, if they were impacts, were basically caused by this close flyby, which would set it apart even more from the previous glacial and interglacial cyclical periods.
Right.
And that those impacts may have actually just thrown us into a totally different
and there
climactic system.
Like the idea that a few of them impacted a couple, 1,000 years apart or whatever.
Yeah.
Creating the entire Younger Dryas period.
Right. And then throwing us into the Holocene.
Right.
Which is a totally different thing from what we see previously, climactically anyway.
Yeah.
Even before the Younger Dryas. Because there were these giant shifts.
Right.
And now we're like in this much more, it's like it created a brand new climate regime.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love the, that aspect of where Randall's going right now in Cosmographia.
Yes. Yeah.
Talking about is this Holocene actually just a little?
Is it an interglacial?
Is it just is it still part of the Pliocene or whatever?
Right. Yeah.
This is just a little period.
Right.
Like within this larger, because if you look at, it seems to be very stable. But if only for 12,000 years. That's, in the grand scheme
Geologically,
of things,
it's
not very long. Whereas the Pliocene is really long time, and that's a totally different level of stability, right? It's obviously it's got these big fluctuations, but they're regular.
Yeah.
So it's stable in its own way.
Right. Yeah, it has the stability of a kind. Yeah.
Yeah. What are you saying, Watcher?
Yeah, so you can't use that speed or that distance, Watcher. that star coming. Okay, so he's saying from 0.8 light years out with an average speed of 60 kilometers per second, it would take an object roughly 240,000 11 years. So I'm sure your math is good there, but it was the star, Schultz's star, that got 0.8 light years close to us, but that doesn't mean that
objects in the Oort cloud could be traveling much faster than
and
that.
Be much closer to us.
That's true.
That star can knock an object out of the Oort cloud without getting anywhere near it. It just needs a little gravitic tug. So, because the Oort cloud is a very, fragile in terms of gravity, because the sun's gravity is almost nothing way out there. So it doesn't take much to nudge something out of place.
Well, so those objects, they shouldn't be traveling very fast either. They should be traveling relatively slowly. Otherwise, they would leave.
Yeah.
Right? So they have to be kind of just barely cruising.
Well, if it knocks it in a certain way, then it it can move in towards the sun. But yeah, you're right. It'd probably be a very slow, gradual thing. What? Find it interesting that what you find. Not sure what you're saying there.
Empties.
You find empties of that number.
But yeah, those were great stories.
Yeah. Thanks.
Great little
Shank
set there.
Yeah. From Twitter. Appreciate that, buddy. Really appreciate that. Oh, okay. Multiples of that number.
Okay.
What time we got here?
I don't know.
Don't know. I didn't start the standard time.
We're done.
Yeah, we're over time.
We're done. Show over.
Show over. We're all dead. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and continue our deep dive into Serpent in the Sky.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen. Profound and amazing show intro number 2. All right, go.
All right. So a couple things I want to address from the last show, from part 1, Serpent in the Sky. So I looked this up. Tautologies, because that's a word that he uses in conjunction with the way that...
It's the study of things that are tight. It's tight, bro. Tautology.
Taut. Well, so I looked it up. It says, it is the saying of the same thing twice in different words, generally considered to be a fault of style.
Nah, mm-mm.
What? No?
It's not a fault of style.
Another definition is a phrase or expression in which the same thing is said twice in different words. A statement that is true by necessity or by virtue of its logical form. Right. So...
Watcher got it.
Yeah. Nah. Mm-mm. I got that.
Oh, okay.
I get it. Now. I didn't get it before. Okay. I get it now.
Stupid joke.
But the way he's using it is it's because of the way that these scientists that science talks about, mainstream science talks about, I think evolutionism, how he uses it in conjunction with that, with natural selection and biological advantage. Those are tautologies. You're saying the same thing.
I see.
With different words, right? But they use them to say, like, natural selection is, what happens because of biological advantage. But he's like, no, those are the same thing you're saying with different words. That's not an explanation, is the point. So I thought...
I got you.
I wanted to make sure that was clear because, like, I remember reading it and I'm like, what is he talking about? Tautology.
It's not really an explanation, but it's like a... Like reiteration.
Yeah, but when they say because,
right,
that's the problem. That's when it becomes a problem, when the tautology of just saying the same thing in a different words becomes a problem, because they're trying to give the second way of saying it as the explanation for the first one.
I gotcha.
So yeah, I wanted to say that because I thought that was important because. He's right. There's a lot of times when okay. And the other thing I wanted to address is he kind of talks about this. He talks about this thing with this problem he has with scientific jargon, and he mentions how it's a way to, that using all this jargon is a way to keep out the uninitiated. Huh? What?
Sort of obfuscate,
yeah,
whatever.
But so are all the old symbols, and stuff. So I'm just like, I don't understand. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not really sure. I don't understand why one is bad and the other one's not.
Well, a lot of, scientific disciplines have to have terms.
Yeah.
They have to have things so that everybody that's doing the science, see, that's like a major part of, I think, the scientific process is getting everyone on the same page in terms of language that you're using, so that when someone says this word, everyone agrees that that word means this one thing.
Yeah.
So that when you say it, you know, like everybody knows what it means.
Yes.
Versus like one person using a descriptive word that they think means this thing, and then everybody or a bunch of other people think it means something else. And
Yeah.
because then you can't really communicate about ideas. So it's important for a scientific discipline to have a lexicon.
Right.
So on the one hand, if that's what he's talking about,
Well, what I mean is that he thinks it's okay for in a symbolist, what he calls the symbolist interpretation of ancient Egypt, that they had this symbological language right?
yeah.
And that they could speak in parables, in esoteric terms, and they would be, and they could talk, and he says they could talk shop in front of people and not worry about giving anything away to the uninitiated. Then on the other hand, when he's talking about modern scientists, he seems to think this is a problem, that modern scientists use jargon to lock out the uninitiated from what they're talking about. And I'm like, well, you just said that's okay with the ancient people.
Okay, well, maybe so. You're reading the book, I'm not, but I know he talks about written language not necessarily being an improvement from the symbols.
You're right. Yeah.
Because he's talking about the fact that because of who was it that was saying, I think we may have screwed ourselves with the written language, like Herodotus or somebody like that.
Yeah.
Because now they're going to forget, the oral traditions didn't require this written language. The oral traditions were able to move with the changing of languages over time.
Yeah.
And therefore the story was preserved in its full context and everything.
Right.
Whereas if you write it down thousands of years later, it's really difficult to understand the context.
Yeah. Yes. I think that, if I'm remembering correctly, that's a mythical tale of Thoth speaking to Ra.
Okay.
Like,
yeah,
look,
yeah,
my lord,
right.
I came up with this writing thing, and Ra's like, this is bad. This is going to be bad.
Yeah, that's right. But I thought that was what I was thinking was that's what he's talking about in terms of the symbolism being better was in comparison to the typical written language.
Okay.
I didn't realize he was talking about that in comparison with speaking.
Well, oh yeah, I don't know. Well, he does. He says that there's one part, and I read it on the last show, where he says that because of his esoteric meanings to all these concepts, that two initiates could talk shop and not worry about giving away secrets to laymen. To the uninitiated is how he put it, right?
Yeah.
But then in other places, he seems upset that this same thing is happening with scientific jargon. Okay, so what the Watcher's pointing out here is that his problem is in antiquity they had the knowledge to obscure, but now they use terms to obscure that they lack knowledge. That's an interesting take on it. Yeah, so the obscuring is for the sake of the knowledge and protecting it in the ancient times, but now it is used to protect the scientists at the cost of the knowledge. Possible. I'm just pointing out more of the cynicism that you were talking about in the last show. That to me, I'm like, yeah, this is more cynical. Like, he just doesn't like modern stuff, but the ancient stuff is great. Like, it's okay that they were keeping secrets and wanted to lock out the uninitiated, but in modern times, it's bullshit.
Yeah,
is the idea that you get.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's probably
there's a little bit of that. I totally agree.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that this is bad. I'm just pointing out that this is what he seems to be doing. And like Kyle said in the last show, maybe he has good reason to do that. Maybe because you were saying like, hey, he knows more about ancient Egypt than I do, so maybe he's totally justified in having this cynical view.
Yeah, just for me, it sort of comes across as a sort of utopian view of the past.
Yeah.
Which you find in a lot of, you hear this sort of sentiment from a lot of areas and people that are...
Yeah, all their napalm turned to dust. And so...
They mummified their bobblehead dolls.
That's right. All right. So we are on... well, let me make sure this is right.
But we love John Anthony West.
Yes, we do. I'm just coming across these questions. Flat utopia.
Butt flap.
Butt flap utopia. Okay. I was thinking flat earth. It's flat utopia. Okay. He says the hieroglyphic system was complete at the time of the earliest dynasties of Egypt. It continued in use for sacred and religious texts throughout the millennia of Egyptian history and even beyond. The last recorded discovered hieroglyphs come from the island of Philae, I think that's how you say that, just below the first Nile cataract, and date from the 4th century AD. Wow. Egypt also had a kind of shorthand system of hieroglyphs called hieratic, which was used for official communications and other secular matters. Later on, presumably to facilitate economic concerns, a still more cursive script called demotic was employed. But hieroglyphs were always the language of the temple. They comprised a symbolic written language based upon principles similar to those governing the symbolism of the Needers and of Egyptian art. The hieroglyphs are both pictorial and phonetic. This was Champollion's great discovery, which led to the initial deciphering. Unfortunately, no one knows exactly how they were supposed to be pronounced. This is a matter of more than academic interest. In the development of so a person called Jenny in the development of cymatics invented a machine, the tonoscope, that converted the sounds of speech into visual equivalents. The vowel O, when spoken into the tonoscope, came out looking like a perfect O. Given the importance attached to Egypt by chants, spells, and a person's name, it is clear that the sound of the words must have had a functional connection with their meanings. This connection is all but lost in modern language, though it lingers on in poetry. I thought you would like this part. The poet agonizes over a choice of words synonymous to the layman. Right? They mean the same thing. A poet agonizes over a choice of words that are synonymous to the layman.
Yeah.
It may be the sound, finally, that is the determining factor.
True.
Yeah. You're
and they're like, people
sounds right.
People are like, what is that? What's that about? She got to cram in all these different ideas so you can get the right words that you want.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
So you can get the right sounds you want.
Okay, he says the Gospels are initiatic texts. They are handbooks to a higher state of consciousness, but they are seldom regarded as such. The Ayers and the Russells misread them as instruments of oppression and monuments to superstition, while the Billy Grahams and assorted do-gooders read into them an authorization to mind other people's business. If this kind of egregious misinterpretation is universally applied to the Gospels, the most familiar text in the West, it is hardly surprising that the inner meanings of the alien sacred writings of Egypt should remain concealed. The inevitable consequence of this is that to Egyptologists, an accurate translation of sacred texts is almost impossible. So that's a good point. Like, biblical texts are practically familiar to anybody in the West, at least in some way, and they're still grossly misunderstood by a lot of people.
Yeah.
So it's no surprise that Egyptian quote unquote religious initiatic texts are
grossly misunderstood.
Yeah. Even worse, because they come from a quote unquote dead civilization.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I want to do here, I've marked 4. Is it 4? Yeah, so 4 translations of the same short series of phrases in the pyramid texts.
All right.
Okay.
Awesome.
Each translation is done by a different authority, quote unquote authority, in Egyptian hieroglyphics and translations. All right, so to pay attention to, you kind of get this, you can kind of see the story, but the translations are vastly different from each other. Okay. So the first one is the phallus of Babi is drawn back. The shutters to the heavens are opened. The shutters to the heavens are shut. The way goes over the fire glow under that which the gods ladle out. What lets every Horus slip through, thereby will W also be made to slip through in this fire glow under that which the gods ladle out. They make a way for W, that W may go upon it. W is a Horus. So one of the problems that John Anthony West said, he's like, look at this gibberish. It's gobbledygook, right? So here's the next one. Draw it, the bolt, back. Oh, Bobji, open the door of the sky. Oh, Horus. Oh, Horus, open to Ra the door of the sky by the flame beneath the inkt of the gods. You stumble, Horus. You stumble. There where W stumbles by that flame under the inkt of the gods, that they may make ready a road for W so that W may pass along it. W is Horus. It's the same text translated by a different guy. Here's another one. The phallus of Babi is drawn back. The doors of the sky are opened. The king has opened the doors of the sky because of the furnace heat which is beneath what the gods pour out. What Horus lets slip, the king lets slip there into this furnace heat which the gods pour out. They make a road for the king that the king may pass on it, for the king is Horus. So you can see some people, some of them are deciding that W means king.
Yeah.
And in other places, the one that I read before, inked is a untranslated hieroglyph. They don't know what it means.
Yeah.
And this guy, at least, is honest about that. He just puts that word in there because he doesn't know how to translate it. But these other people are hiding that untranslated word in their context. So here's the last one. The phallus of Babj is drawn back. The doors of the heavens may open. The doors of the heavens may shut. Onus has unbolted the way that passes over the fire under the inkt of the gods. That which each Horus lets slip, Onus lets slip across this fire under the inkt of the gods. They make a way for Horus so that Onus may pass. So those are 4 different people translating the same 3 or 4 lines of text. So John Anthony West is like, this is crap. First of all, each one is like practically gibberish.
Yeah.
And second of all, they're so different from each other that which one do you take is what, which one do you take as being a real translation?
None of them.
Yeah.
I would like a tautological explanation of this.
So he says that, so then he gives he's like, if you were just going to translate it without putting in a whole bunch of stuff around it, and you were just going to translate the direct symbols, it would be real short. Draw it back, Babi. Open the 2 shutters of heaven. Open for Unis above the flame.
That sounds way better.
Yeah.
But where's that one word that nobody knows what it
Inked?
means?
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, it's bin. He translates it as bin there.
Like the bin stone?
Yeah.
Nobody knows what that is either.
Right. Exactly.
The bin stone was most likely orichalcum or something.
Yeah. It was a pyramid of orichalcum. Yeah, so what he's pointing out here, obviously, is that...
Or was it electrum?
Electrum or orichalcum. Yeah. Electrum is what was written on the obelisk as what was built, how it was wrought with electrum.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought this is what made me keep thinking of SitchinIsWrong.com, because the whole argument there is that Sitchin is translating that his interpretations of these translations are wrong, right? But this shows you that like none of these guys have the same interpretation. You can take any translation and then start twisting it, and these people are obviously doing that because the actual translation, if you just do it symbol by symbol, is much shorter. And I can't read this, but in these translations, a lot of things are in parenthetical, so they're like inserting whole phrases to try to make it make sense. But how do you make it make sense if you don't know the original teachings?
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. W means king. That's how I wanted to read it.
So my whole assertion that, I guess we were making a joke about this a long time ago about how they thought, well, we'll write in symbols because it's really easy to figure out, right? It's
Trust
obvious.
me, guys. Everyone will know exactly what this means. Okay. So the next part here, he says, the temple at Luxor, which Schwaller de Lubitz calls the temple of man, is the perfect example of symbolic understanding in action. It is a vast stone symbol, the greatest achievement of New Kingdom Egypt, incorporating within it or utilizing the totality of Egyptian wisdom, science, mathematics, geodesy, geography, geometry, medicine, astronomy, astrology, magic, myth, art, and symbolism.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the Watcher is saying is
Bobby, yeah. Bobby is a god of the underworld. Stands next to the lake of fire and feeds on the entrails of the damned. And he is, yes, so there was lots of baboon talk in there around all these quotes. So John Anthony West gives all 4 of those quotes, and all around it, he's doing all this analysis. I just wanted to read the 4 different translations and show how different they are right next to each other. And yeah, the whole opening the door, the doors of heaven are open to you. The doors of the duat are open to you. And they do this repetition like it's meant to be chanted.
like it's a song.
Yeah.
Something.
Yes.
I'd imagine if, somebody carved lyrics like to the word of any popular song.
Yeah.
And then they carved that into some stone, and then that was interpreted
Yeah.
thousands of years from now. I'd be like, this is so repetitive.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the Watcher is saying he opens the doors to heaven or hell, and he carries out the sentencing. That context makes the translation way easier. But that's okay. That's let's see. How do I say this?
That context was built by the same people doing these translations.
Yes,
so.
exactly.
And that's part of translating it, is that you have to keep translating things. What was that? Like you just keep translating things until you find something solid somewhere that explains some context, and then you take that piece of information, you go back through everything you've already translated,
right,
or you're looking at, and you're trying to fill in the blanks of context.
Yeah.
So that's part of the process, but it's nowhere near complete.
Yes.
At this point.
Okay. There is next part of the book here. There is an amusing story relating to the original appearance of Le Temple del Homme, which is the Temple of Man, in 1957. So he's talking about the Schwaller de Lubitz's 3-part series on the temple. So there's an amusing story relating to the original appearance of this book and its official reception. Rather than try to summarize this, which would mean deleting all the funny bits, a short personal experience will capture the essence of the situation. Early on in my research, before I had studied Le Temple del Homme in depth, I was granted an interview with a high-ranking official of the Egyptological department of the British Museum. He assured me that in his opinion, and in the opinion of all other Egyptologists, Schwaller de Lubitz was mad. His work was repudiated in its entirety. I replied that I realized this, yet that to me, a layman, it all seemed backed by exhaustive documentation. Documentation, moreover, that had been checked and supervised on the site by an Orthodox Egyptologist converted to the Symbolist school, Alexander Varil, and by an architect, Clement Robichon, chief of excavations for the French Egyptological team in Egypt. Was there, I asked, any disproof of the documentation? The official admitted there was not, but assured me that if Egyptologists should trouble themselves to furnish themselves with disproof, which they were too busy to do, that disproof would soon be acquired. It was impossible to argue effectively against this conviction. I asked if he might furnish me with an instance where, even without formal disproof, he could substantiate an error. He admitted that he had not actually read through Le Temple d'El-Hom, nor did he know of any other Egyptologist who had.
Of course.
Classic.
Sounds like a similar situation with Bohr and the measurement problem.
Yes. Yeah, no one read the paper.
Bohr wrote a paper that was basically like, yeah, problem solved. And nobody read it, but they all agreed
Yeah.
that the problem was solved and Bohr had figured it out.
Right, except in this case, they're all disagreeing.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, same. Yeah.
Yeah. Schwaller de Lubitz calls the Egyptian philosophy the anthropocosm, or anthropocosm. I'm not sure how to say that. Mm-hmm. The man cosmos, a concept whose subtleties are not easily grasped. It has found its way into two familiar sayings, the Hermetic as above, so below, and the biblical God fashioned man in his image. But both these sayings, while true, incline to misleading interpretations. The first lends itself to too sharp a distinction, while the second lends itself to too close a commingling. Man is not exactly a little universe to be regarded as distinct from a greater universe. On the other hand, the biblical phrase lends itself to pictures of a muscular god with a long gray beard, which is not right either. Schwaller de Lubitz claims that Egyptian temples were constructed and demolished according to astrological plan and never according to the whim of a pharaoh. Powerful evidence can be marshaled in support of this claim. Certain temples of Egypt have been partially or nearly totally ruined due to natural causes. Others have been deliberately dismantled. It is fairly easy to distinguish between the two types of destruction. Temples destroyed by nature, earthquakes for example, present the archaeologist with a site in which vast amounts of rubble have been covered over by sand. Napoleon's drawings and early photos show the state of these sites as they were found originally. After excavation, the typical result is that most or much of the fallen stonework is still on site, sufficient in certain cases to make restoration feasible. By contrast, temples that have been dismantled deliberately are found practically clear of rubble. There is nothing there except what has fallen through natural means. After the site is cleared, there is nothing remaining that would make any restoration possible.
I just had a thought, it's like side point.
Okay.
But when they do these restorations, are they like, how are they indicating to future civilizations that it was restored? Like, are they putting little metal plaques on the wall? Or are they actually putting like a stele there? Do we still put steles in places where we have...
No, they try to rebuild it just like it was. We do.
Yeah, but we need to indicate for future civilizations that we did that.
Yeah.
Like, just like the ancient Egyptians did.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, they weren't... yeah, I don't know.
Because, I mean, it seems like we should sort of be following in the tradition, you know? Like, well,
Yeah.
Get a big piece of granite from somewhere really far away.
Bring it over here and write on it.
Carve on it that
Yeah.
in our language that, you know, we did this.
Yeah. It's probably the tourist little plinths, you know. And you walk up and there's a little plaque for the tourist
That's what
to read.
I'm saying.
That's that's what we put up
It's
there.
going to be gone.
Yeah. Unless it's covered and protected by sand.
We're going to further confuse future generations that are trying to understand Egypt as well. Because you know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know. When they dismantled temples, they took them down to the ground practically. So
Right. But
we don't do that.
Yeah, but we can tell it's like, well, there was
Yeah.
a temple here and it's been completely dismantled.
Right. And they actually decommissioned stuff by
then
marking the tops of columns.
If a temple was destroyed by a natural disaster, they just left it and they built another one somewhere or something.
Yeah.
Whereas we're going and restoring these temples that are going to confuse the situation in the future.
Well, our civilization will never fall. Don't you know that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. By Christian standards, all the gods of Egypt were pagan, and all were equally unacceptable. The assumption that the effacement of the Egyptian reliefs was performed by Christians, reasonable as it may sound, is contradicted by the evidence. It is clear that some method of selection guided the practice. Some reliefs are hammered out, while others right alongside, depicting gods and scenes no less pagan, are left untouched. In many instances, the effacing itself is carried out in an inexplicable manner. Sometimes the whole figure is hammered out, sometimes just the face. Sometimes the face is left alone and a specific area of the body or of the costume is effaced, and the rest is untouched. Religious zealots, as history shows, have never behaved in this manner on any other occasion. If Egyptologists wish to go on believing the Christian zealots responsible for the effacement of the reliefs, they will have to find evidence to account for their bizarre and unique behavior.
That's cool.
Yeah. And we've noticed this looking at pictures. Quote-unquote effacement, defacement, the redactions are very specific.
Yeah.
And, once Egypt had fallen, I mean, those quote-unquote Christian zealots couldn't read the hieroglyphs. They didn't know what to efface. They didn't know what they were looking at.
Yeah.
So if they would have been effacing them, they would have just been all over the place instead of very specifically on parts of figures. Okay. The archaeological record for the period preceding dynastic Egypt is confused and incomplete. A number of Neolithic cultures are thought to have existed more or less simultaneously from about 6000 BC onwards. These cultures built nothing permanent, apparently, and their arts and crafts were simple and rudimentary. There is no archaeological evidence that would support the notion of a prior great civilization, with one possible exception. These simple cultures had cultivated cereal grains and domesticated animals. The manner in which wild grains were originally cultivated and wild animals permanently domesticated is one of those questions that cannot be satisfactorily answered. But a period of long development is assumed. The fact is that throughout recorded history, no new animals have been domesticated, our domestic beasts have been around since the beginning, and no new grains have been cultivated. The cultivation of grain and the domestication of animals probably represent, after the invention of language, the two most significant human achievements. We can fly to the moon today, but we cannot domesticate the zebra or any other animal. We do not know how the original domestication was done. We can only guess. To attribute these immense achievements to people who could only chip flint and work crude mats and pottery is perhaps premature. It is plausible to suggest that, like the Sphinx and its temple complex, these inventions dated from an earlier and much higher civilization. So this is one of the points I tried to make, I think, like in the first episode, number 2, that no one knows really how this is done. And we're given this story of like, well, this improbable story of like it took, the whole trial and error thing again. But we've never done it again, It's the whole thing of like, if you think you know how they built the pyramids, build one. If you think you know how they domesticated animals and crops, do it.
Yeah.
Okay. What time we got here? Because I started this thing late. Yeah. Time to stop. Time to take a break.
Yeah.
All right. We're on page 219.
All right.
Yeah.
Some progress.
All right.
That was a long 4 chapters.
Yeah. What did I say? History the way you wish it was taught. Back when you were in school. here on Brothers of the Serpent podcast. So, we actually already did this.
Round 2.
Round 2 of segment 3.
I, in putting in this bumper music, accidentally disarmed Russ's mic. So the entire segment was me going, uh-huh. Wow. Whoa.
Yeah, and me sounding like I was on the other side of the room, which I was to his mic.
All right.
Yeah.
Round 2.
Round 2.
Go. I'll act surprised. And the watcher has already posted everything that we need to see.
Yeah. So first I want to start with explaining, did I do this in this segment? About the book? About how I was a lot farther through it than I thought?
I can't remember.
I can't remember either.
I think you did it at the end of the last one.
Did I do that at the end of the last one?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Wait, you did it on the... Okay, Brett
It was
says
this
it was
segment. Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Yeah, it's hard to remember now because I did say it, but we don't know when. So
I'm sorry. Major screw up on my part. I was just making jokes about how I was doing my job. It was easy. And I just failed. I had one job.
You have one job. Yeah, so on the last show, I was saying, I'm only halfway through the book. But that's based on when you're reading in Kindle, down at the bottom on the lower right, it gives you a percentage number of how far you are through the book. So it was telling me 50%, and I was thinking I was only halfway through it. But that's because it turns out there are like 3 long appendices and a huge bibliography. So like 80% was actually the entire book in terms of the main content that he wrote originally.
Yeah.
And then the last chapter is about the Sphinx and about Swallow de Lubitz's observation that it's water, weathered by water. And he talks about how, okay, this should be able to be confirmed geologically speaking or whatever. And he talks about the Valley Temple and the Mortuary Temple and gives you some, talks about how they just don't look Egyptian at all. They just don't look like anything else that's built in Egypt. And he mentions the Osirian too. He's like, the only other thing in Egypt that looks like this is the Osirian, and it also doesn't look Egyptian, and it's buried. It was 50 feet below ground level.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying about the book, though, is that I was actually most of the way through it when I was doing the last show. And so John Anthony West's style is there's no first of all, there's no travel narrative. So I noticed this, this is one of the things that makes it harder for me to give a walkthrough of this book, because like Chris Dunn and Graham Hancock's book, everything is interwoven into this travel narrative.
Right.
There's none of that in this. Even though John Anthony West has obviously traveled all over Egypt, he's not telling you.
But he does 4 tours a year.
Yeah. He's not like saying I was going here and then I went here and saw this. He's actually just laying it all out. And he meanders back and forth between philosophy and pointing out certain things of Schwaller de Lubitz, and then pointing out certain things that he's noticed about Egyptian civilization all the way through the book. Right. And so I was wondering if there was going to be, if he was building up to some kind of grand finale. And in a way he did, but his grand finale was more like, I think we could learn if we could if science would drop all of its prejudices and its antiquated 18th century look at Egypt, which is, he kind of is pointing out, like, look, Egyptology was started in the 18th century and it hasn't changed much since.
Yeah.
He's like, if they could drop all that and if we could look at Egypt afresh, then we could really learn something that we could teach our modern civilization, and that would be a very positive thing. That's what he was saying.
That I totally agree. I mean, I think that's, yes.
Okay. So the next thing I'm going to read here, this is John Anthony West talking about the myths and legends associated with Egypt and the pyramids. And so he's got this guy, John Greaves, called The Enduring Mystery, which was written in 1646. And this guy is basically recounting what he got from what he considered to be, he says, the Arabian writers, especially such as have purposefully treated the wonders of Egypt, have given us a more full description of the pyramids. But that hath been mixed with so many inventions of their own, that the truth hath been darkened and almost extinguished by them. I shall put down that which is confessed by them to be the most probable relation, as is reported by Ibn Abd al-Qom, or al-Hakam, I think that's how you say it, whose words out of the Arabic are these. And so now he's quoting this guy, and this is, again, what he said the Arabs say is the most probable relation of their legends about the pyramids and Egypt. So they say, the greatest part of chronologers agree that he which built the pyramids was Sarid ibn Salhuk, king of Egypt, who lived 300 years before the flood. The occasion of this was because he saw in his sleep that the whole earth was turned over, with the inhabitants of it, the men lying upon their faces, and the stars falling down and striking one another with a terrible noise. And being troubled by this, he concealed it. Then after he saw the first stars falling to the earth, and in the similitude of white fowl, and they snatched up men and carried them between two great mountains, and these mountains closed upon them, and the shining stars were made dark. And he awakened with great fear, and assembled the chief priests of all the provinces of Egypt, 130 priests. The chief of them was called Aklimun. He related the whole matter to them, and they took the altitude of the stars, and made their prognostication, and they foretold of a deluge. The king said, "Will it come to our country?" And they answered, "Yes, and it will destroy it." And there remained a certain number of years to come, and he commanded in the mean space to build the pyramids, and that a vault or cistern should be made, into which the river Nile should enter, from whence it should run into the countries of the west, and into the land Al-Said. And he filled them, the pyramids, with talismans, and with strange things, and with riches and treasures, and the like. He engraved in them all things that were told by wise men, as also all profound sciences, the names of the Alakakirs, the uses and hurts of them. I think those might be demons, or like the jinn. The sciences of astrology and arithmetic and of geometry and of physics. All this may be interpreted by him that knows their characters and language. After he had given orders for this building, they cut out vast columns and wonderful stones. They fetched massy stones from the Ethiopians and made with these the foundations of the 3 pyramids, fastening them together with lead and iron. They built the gates of them 40 cubits underground, and they made the height of the pyramids 100 royal cubits, which are 500 of ours in these times. He also made each side of them as 100 royal cubits. The beginning of this building was in a fortunate horoscope. After that he had finished it, he covered it with the colored satin, or marble, from the top to the bottom, and he appointed a solemn festival, at which were present all the inhabitants of his kingdom. Then he built in the western pyramid 30 treasuries, filled with a store of riches and utensils, and with signatures made of precious stones. I think that means signing seals. Signatures made of precious stones, and with instruments of iron, and vessels of earth, and with mess which rusts not. I don't know what word that is, MES, but it sounds like, iron which rusts not.
Yeah.
And with glass which might be bended and yet not broken. There's another legend we've talked about. And with strange spells, and with several kinds of akakirs, single and double, and with deadly poisons, and with other things besides. He made also in the East Pyramid diverse celestial spheres and stars, and what they severally operate in their aspects, and the perfumes with which are to be used to them, and the books which treat of these matters. Like perfumes as in like anointing liquids, oils and stuff.
The mess might be maize. Like
May.
The May.
Yeah, could be.
The instruments and tools of the
Anunnaki.
Yeah.
Yeah. He put also in the colored pyramid, the third, the commentaries of the priests in chests of black marble. I was thinking of that's the Serapeum right there.
Exactly.
And with every priest a book in which were the wonders of his profession and of his actions and of his nature and what was done in his time and what is and what shall be from the beginning of time to the end of it. He placed in every pyramid a treasurer. The treasurer of the westerly pyramid was a statue of marble stone standing upright with a lance, and upon his head a serpent wreathed. He that came near it and stood still, the serpent bit him of one side and wreathed round his throat and killed him, and then returned to its place. He made the treasurer of the east pyramid an idol of black agate, his eyes open and shining, sitting upon a throne with a lance. And when any looked upon him, he heard of one side of him a voice, which took away his sense, so that he fell prostrate upon his face, and ceased not until he died. So it's like it hypnotizes you or something, and you just lay down and die. Starve to death. Or, die of thirst. He made the treasurer of the colored pyramid a statue of stone, called Albut, sitting. He which looked towards it was drawn by the statue, till he stuck to it, and could not be separated from it, till such time as he died.
That's really weird.
But all the catastrophic stuff in there is at the beginning, the stars falling and the...
Yeah, that's really awesome. I also was wondering about the redirection of the Nile, like to the western countries.
Into a big cistern underground. Is what it said.
Because I was thinking about the Ethiopians, the whole idea that they can redirect it.
Right.
So I was wondering, maybe it like they either maybe they redirected it in order to build all that stuff, or they moved it out of where they wanted to build.
Yeah.
And then dug all the tunnels and everything, and then opened the gates and let it go back.
Yeah. Could be. I mean, there's plenty
really cool.
There's plenty of rumors, myths, legends, and stuff that beneath the Giza Plateau is this massive, including a labyrinth of tunnels, also a very elaborate channeling system for water. But I really did love that the chests of black marble, I'm just like, the Serapeum boxes, man. And in each one was a priest and his book and all of his sciences and everything that he knows.
Computers.
Yeah.
I think it's also cool that the guy's name is Skyhook.
Yeah, I noticed that. Ibn al-Hook Skyhook.
Al-Hook.
Okay, so at the end of the book here, I've got two quotes pulled out from it. That John Anthony West says. He says, all esoteric doctrines teach that death is not an end, but a point of transformation. Throughout the ages, masters, saints, wise men, yogis have terminated their lives in a state of serene accomplishment. What applies to the individual applies to society as a whole, and a successful civilization, in principle, should end on a similar note of serenity. That history provides precisely contrary evidence is simply a reflection upon the level of civilization collectively attained, and there is not the slightest doubt of our present state. The deluge is once again upon us. So the deluge here being a metaphor for just the end of all, everything's going to hell.
Yeah, we're like, in his opinion, we're dying like your average person dies, like unexpectedly and by some ailment that is.
Yeah.
You haven't achieved your goals in life. And
yeah. And I think he's thinking of it's a deluge of chaos.
Yeah, but it's weird to think, does he think that the Egyptian civilization like reached nirvana and was just like, okay, we're done?
They just all transcended and left? Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, that's kind of what he's saying is like these saints and monks and whatever that.
Yeah. Well, he makes this the big leap, I think, here is where he says what applies to the individual applies to society as a whole. And I'm like, I don't know.
That's what I meant.
If that's real. I don't know if I agree with that.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I don't think you can do that. You can have a civilization in which people reach that, that state of nirvana and do die in serenity, end their lives in perfect harmony with everything, or at least attempt to do that. But the vast majority of the people in the civilization around that person don't. So is it a statement of the state of the civilization that most of them don't? Or is it just a statement about humans and human condition that the vast majority of people are going to do this the Osirian way as opposed to the Horian one?
Yeah.
Like he talked about before.
But also he's saying he's extrapolating out to the entire civilization dying in that same way.
Okay, yeah. I guess you could say that, but that didn't happen to the Egyptians.
That's what I'm trying to say.
But it does seem to have gone through calamities multiple times because there are temples that have been destroyed by such.
Right. Yeah.
So yes, it ended many times and it actually was able to be reborn. But each time it was less than it was.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what he's talking about.
Maybe.
The old kingdom, when it finally, before it became the middle kingdom, there's the first, what they call the first intermediary period, which was, like 100 years long or something like that, where everything fell into chaos and nobody built anything. And then the middle kingdom shows up and they're totally different. You can recognize them as being Egyptian, but they've lost a lot. So maybe that first old kingdom civilization, the first 5 dynasties or whatever, ended in this state of serenity while the comet was coming out of the sky or something.
Yeah, okay. That's I think that could be achieved.
Yeah.
Even in modern day civilization.
Yeah.
Yes, there's all kinds of crazy chaos. Maybe it's not as bad as it has been in recent history. Again, like World War I, World War II, whatever. But if I tend to believe that if we found out that we were all doomed, there would be some chaos.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, even the people that would typically go into chaotic rage or whatever, just stop caring about anything at all. Like eventually, I mean, if we're all going to die,
which we are all going to die.
No, but I mean, if there's
the same
a known
time.
moment, if there's a known moment, destiny.
Yeah.
And we all knew it collectively. I feel like there would be a massive effort to do something to preserve modern civilization.
I think so.
in some way.
I think so too.
And we might end up, like we were talking about a couple shows back, or maybe it was the last show. Like, could we build the pyramids? Or no, it was the
with Chris Dunn. Yeah.
Could we build one of these things? No, but if we were hired to do it, we could.
We can't do it right now, but we could do it
because we would have to invent the
stuff
the tools needed to do it. Yeah, and I think that we would do that.
Yeah,
not everybody,
right?
Obviously, but there would be a large effort. I think. So.
Yeah. Yeah, our civilization just hasn't been tested that way yet.
Right. And you can put that on a personal level too. Like some people that haven't been tested.
Yeah.
Maybe don't ever really see their full potential.
Right. But that just made me this is a complete aside, but I was just thinking like the nearest, like, at least United States civilization came to where everybody was thinking we're going to have a common doomsday was, Cold War kind of nuclear, like especially like with
Cuban
Missile Crisis, right? And I just found it, I just think it's interesting that the response to that was what? Everybody build stuff underground.
Ah, yes. I was about to say climb under a table.
Right. That's what, that's, you think the Egyptians had the equivalent of duck and cover for the comet coming,
Shouldn't be laughing about that.
What I'm saying is like, everybody thought, holy crap, the fire from the sky is going to come down and kill us. And what did everybody do? Start building bunkers underground.
Right.
So like, yeah. I think that's a little bit interesting.
That's
there.
cool. Yeah, very interesting.
So the last time that a modern Western civilization was quote unquote tested like that, what did they do? They build underground. Yeah, start making varas.
Yeah, start putting all the important stuff down there.
Yeah. Every book you can get your hand on.
Yeah.
You know, supplies to last you, water.
Great point.
Yeah. Okay, so the final mark I made in the last book, this is actually the last part of the final chapter here before the appendices about the Sphinx. He says, "Yet our situation is richer in potential than in any in the known past, and it is equally rich in irony, for the very forces responsible for bringing on the rains have inadvertently provided the material for building the vessel that can see the flood through." Right.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about, you know, the whole idea of him being cynical about modern society. Right there, he's saying that we have an incredible potential, unlike any civilization in the past.
Right. But
we're not really utilizing it.
But gaining that potential is the reason why everything's going to hell, is kind of what he's saying there. The same forces that bring on the rains have inadvertently provided the material to survive it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in this quote unquote unthinking quest for scientific knowledge, we have brought about our own destruction. But that same unthinking quest for scientific knowledge has given us the tools to survive the destruction.
Right.
I'm like, well, then what's the problem, guy? If whatever we're doing is bringing a destruction upon us, but also gives us the means to not be destroyed by it, what's the problem?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. It's the same argument that if you make a sword, it gives you the ability to do some serious melee, destruction.
Yeah, that's right.
But you can also protect yourself,
right,
and protect others.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the same.
Yeah, that sword can cut you, but you can also use it to save your own life.
Yeah, and the lives of others.
Yeah. To me, I'm just
I don't think it's a problem. I think he's just pointing out that we don't have the initiative to do these things without the impending doom.
Right.
Right. So I'm thinking of a comet or something like that. We're not out there building pyramids and digging varas and putting all of our knowledge, but there are some things going on. Like, let's put a library on the moon and whatever, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's a seed vault somewhere.
Yeah, there are some cool efforts, right? But not a worldwide effort to preserve. But again, that goes back to the story that we're telling ourselves about history.
Yeah.
There's all of this skating around the doom and destruction part of our past.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's all uniformitarian and whatever.
That's true.
And so we don't have any sense of urgency to do anything about our continued existence.
Yeah, because it's not an imminent threat. But what he's saying is that the threat is not a comet.
No, yeah, I know.
That's why I'm like, what's the problem here? It sounds to me like he's saying that the pursuit of knowledge in the scientific sense is bringing about our is bringing about the end, but at the same time has given us the tools for it not to be the end.
Yeah.
I'm just like, okay, well, that sounds like any pursuit of knowledge.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's true. It seems true
to
me. I think we've even talked about that before, too. It's like,
the Watcher says some of the mummies we would leave behind would be more cocaine and nicotine than any flesh. That's great.
All right, let's go to the Sphinx.
Well, I haven't finished this quote yet.
Oh.
However mistaken the spirit in which it has been performed, however perverted the conclusions commonly drawn from it, it is modern scientific scholarship that has made possible both access to the high wisdom of ancient Egypt, which is the wisdom of Atlantis, and the capacity to study and understand it. Schwaller de Lubitz's interpretation of ancient Egypt understood in all its potential, in all of its implications, is no less than the blueprint for an arc. Again, metaphorically speaking, there. An arc.
Like he's saying Schwaller's breakdown of what was going on in Egypt is a sort of method or something that we can follow to do the same?
To save our civilization.
Save ourselves, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. That what Schwaller was pulling out of the information encoded into the temple is a way of having a civilization without it being doomed by its own internal stuff.
Yeah.
So that would be the metaphorical arc. Like, our civilization is dooming itself by being the way it is, according to John Anthony West.
Yeah.
And if we could extract what Schwaller learned about Egypt and then inject it into our civilization, it would save us from our own the destruction we're bringing upon ourselves.
But the only way to do that is to have doom from outer space. Whoa.
What was that meme? I remember the first TED Talk. It was most excellent.
But that was like my point was that the only way that we're actually going to do that is if we
see an existential threat coming from space.
Then
We're never going to acknowledge an existential threat coming from within.
that's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And it
with that.
sort of reminds me of the whole, Bill and Ted problem with like becoming awesome musicians. They needed Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah. First, we need Eddie Van Halen. But to get Eddie Van Halen, we must make a most triumphant video. To make a most triumphant video, we have to learn how to play. And that is why we need Eddie Van Halen. Whoa. Yes, we can quote that entire movie. So yeah, all I'm saying is I agree with you that what you were saying in the first show, that he's got some cynicism about him.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Maybe this is because I don't understand enough about history, but it seems to me like that civilization has always been on the brink of collapse, of bringing about its own doom. The more, especially when you're talking about advancement in terms of technology.
Yeah.
Every new technological development is both a great gift and also very dangerous. It's just
right.
And there's so you can't use it as an argument to like we shouldn't do that. To me, that's what I'm saying. Like, do you not make the sword?
Yeah, I don't think he's saying that. I think he's just pointing out that this is the tendency.
Okay. Yeah, the Watcher's saying the higher the tower is built, the more likely it is to fall. That's right.
That's true.
Well, maybe not. I mean, I guess metaphorically speaking, but plenty of short buildings fall over and tall ones don't. All right. Appendix 1. We have time here?
Yep.
Okay. Since the last chapter of this book was written, an archaeological and geological survey of the Sphinx has been undertaken. So again, I want to say that there's multiple appendices, and he kept adding these on as more information about the Sphinx came out. Okay. So this first one is before he got Schoch involved. An archaeological and geological survey of the Sphinx has been undertaken. The project was carried out by Mark Lenner, field director for the American Research Center in Egypt, and Dr. K. Lal Gari, director of the Stone Conservation Laboratory at the University of Louisville, Kentucky. Wow, this is a Stone Conservation Laboratory.
Yeah.
It's cool. That's where I want to work. It sounds like an easy job. Stone
yeah, it does.
Kind of hangs around for a long time. It was funded by a grant from the Edgar Cayce Foundation. Strange intellectual bedfellows indeed, except it's not, because Mark Lenner's Egyptology degree was paid for by the Edgar Cayce Foundation.
Really?
Yes. We kind of went into this really early on in the podcast about how there's this
I thought
weird...
that was Zahi Hawass.
Yeah. Zahi Hawass, too.
Okay.
They brought Zahi Hawass, who was just a temple guard or something, and they brought him to the United States and paid for him to go to the University of Pittsburgh to get a degree in Egyptology, and then he went back and became and was able to rise in the ranks, and he was indebted to them. Mark Lenner was an Egyptologist he at the beginning was like the Edgar Cayce Foundation people, was very interested in Atlantis, but they paid for him to go to school and then sent him to Egypt. So him and Zahi Hawass sort of teamed up. Now they've got somebody who is an Egyptian, who is high up in the government, who's got an Egyptology degree, who owes it to them. And now they've got their Egyptologist over there. And then they seem to completely break ranks after they get there and totally go full standard model and like argue against everything that is not standard model, but still being funded by these people from the Edgar Cayce Foundation who are looking for Atlantis. It's weird.
Or is that a front?
It's a front. Yeah.
By the Edgar Cayce Foundation.
Well, Mark Lenner and Zahi Hawass are putting up a front, pretending to be full standard model while they are looking for Atlantis for the Edgar Cayce Foundation.
Okay. Oh. They're hiding the knowledge, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa. Holy crap. That totally just... Wow.
Yeah, this is all. That's always.
That would be insane if that's what really was going on.
Yeah.
That's why they don't, like when Robert Schoch comes and says, "Oh, this is water erosion."
They flip
like,
out.
"Bah!"
Yeah.
Robert Bouval, same deal.
Yeah. Yeah, their public thing is to put up this front of like full standard model, while secretly they're being funded by the ARE and the Edgar Cayce Foundation to look for fucking shit about Atlantis. This has pissed me off for years. So
the Edgar Cayce Foundation is cool with that. I mean, this is all part of the same.
Yeah, people have asked them like, "What's," and they're like, they just shrug and smile.
Yeah, but this is sort of hide the knowledge type of thing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, well, most of my questions about why they are scriptards have totally been answered now. Thank you. And we should probably take a break.
Okay.
Just go into that.
Yeah.
Man, I'm glad we did this segment over again.
Yeah, it was way better this time.
Holy crap. We should do every show twice.
Oh, God. All right.
Snakes! We're back for the final segment of the final hour. Snake Bros Institute for Advanced Mind Explosions. Totally changed the whole paradigm of mine about these scriptards in Egypt.
Yeah.
They're actually looking for the real knowledge, folks. And they've been creating a diversion.
Yeah.
I seriously just thought they didn't want to be wrong.
Yeah. Well, there are plenty of Egyptologists that are like that, but Lenner and Hawass, who are directly associated with the...
Totally changes the whole Gantenbrink's door situation.
Yeah, it does.
The way they screwed up the publications on all of that. And
yeah. Yep.
There's this huge gap of time between when they found the door and then finally it's like, oh, okay, we're going to drill through it. Oh, there's nothing there, folks.
Yeah.
Yep. Damn it.
Yep.
All right, Sphinx. We know it's old. They know it's old.
Since the last chapter of this book was written, an archaeological and geological survey of the Sphinx has been undertaken. The project was carried out by Mark Lenner, field director for the American Research Center in Egypt, and Dr. K. Gari, director of the Stone Conservation Laboratory at the University of Louisville, Kentucky. Okay, I read all this before. Yeah, so they were working with the Edgar Cayce Foundation. Okay, so it says the results were published in the American Research Center in Egypt newsletter, numbers 112 and 114. The survey was not designed to test for the possibility of a drastically altered chronology, and the conclusions put forward by Leonard and Gari avoid any mention of such a revision. Nevertheless, in essence and detail, the published findings support the argument developed in my final chapter. Alternative explanations for the weathering to the Sphinx, advanced by Dr. Gari in order to preserve the accepted chronology, are, in my view, utterly unconvincing and are contradicted by the very facts that he himself revealed. But since my letter to Dr. Gari designed to challenge his conclusions remains unanswered, official endorsement has not yet been granted. Readers who have been following the scholarly reaction to Schwaller de Lubitz's meticulously documented theories throughout the course of this book will not be surprised by this latest show of scholarly incuriosity. Though the published reports are somewhat technical, the issues at stake are easily explained and perfectly comprehensible to the alert reader. Here are the main points, and I will elaborate further below. 1. The standard explanation that the weathering to the Sphinx is due to wind and sand has been abandoned. 2. Mark Leonard finds that there has been not one, but 3 separate major repair campaigns carried out on the Sphinx. The dating of these campaigns poses perhaps insoluble problems. Leonard provisionally dates the earliest campaign to the New Kingdom, 1550 to 1070 BC. 3. Leonard notes that until the past few decades, no substantial weathering has taken place on the Sphinx since the first repair campaign was carried out. This is perhaps the most crucial point in the argument for a revised chronology and must be emphasized. 4. Leonard goes on to deduce that this leaves only 500 years, plus or minus, for the Sphinx to have eroded from its original to its present condition, with channels worn 2 feet deep into the limestone walls. 5. Tests by Dr. Gari prove that the weathering is due to water reacting with the natural salts in the limestone. In other words, that the damage to the Sphinx is due to water erosion. 6. However, he insists that this is due to groundwater leaching into the body of the Sphinx from below. He does not elaborate on the mechanism theoretically responsible. Neither he nor Leonard seem troubled by the contradictions implicit in their conclusions. So, like he said, that part needs to be these 2 parts about the repair campaigns and the time that gives for the erosion to take place. All this is according to Orthodox chronology, right? So if you date the first repair campaign to the Middle Kingdom, or to the New Kingdom, you've got 500 years or so before for the erosion to take place. And he says that no erosion has taken place since the repairs happened.
Right.
So the date that he gives for the first campaign is 500 years away from what they say was the original carving of the Sphinx.
Right. So in 500 years, all of the erosion we know about was supposedly created.
Right. That's what they say. And then the other big problem here is
I didn't realize that they had ditched the wind erosion.
Yeah, in this study they did.
Before Schoch.
Right, I know, because you see wind and sand erosion being argued as the mechanism.
But
still.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It's still being argued.
Yeah.
So that's weird.
Yeah. Okay, so John says, the key to the fallacy is Leonard's discovery that no substantial erosion has taken place since the earliest repair campaign was undertaken. At the same time, Leonard claims that given the Orthodox chronology, only 500 years can be allowed for the erosion to have occurred. Where then was Dr. Gari's underground water at this time? And how did it leach up into the body of the Sphinx, eroding channels 2 feet deep into its sides in only 500 years, then ceasing such destructive action for the remaining 4,000 years. It might be argued, perhaps, that the various repair campaigns effectively prevented further erosion by protecting the surface of the Sphinx. But this argument will not do. The walls of the hollow, carved out to free the body of the Sphinx, have never been repaired, and these show an erosion pattern absolutely identical to that on the Sphinx itself. Meaning,
Right.
if the repairs protected the Sphinx from further erosion, why didn't the
walls erode further.
continue to erode?
Yeah.
Yeah. Since Dr. Gari's explanation calls for erosion taking place at the unthinkable rate of 4 inches per century, the walls of the hollow, never having been repaired, should show more severe erosion than the body of the Sphinx itself. Yet they do not. The questions raised by Dr. Gari's explanation are further compounded by the peculiarities of the Egyptian groundwater level. This, until the recent disturbing factor of the Aswan High Dam, has been tied to the annual flooding of the Nile and can be easily calculated and demonstrated. Over the millennia, the Nile floods have gradually deposited successive layers of silt, raising the floor of the floodplain at roughly the rate of 10 feet per 1,000 years. The underground water table has risen accordingly. This means that when the Sphinx was built, allegedly just short of 5,000 years ago, the groundwater table level was some 50 feet below its present level. Following Dr. Gari's explanation, this means that underground water, 50 feet lower than at its present level, seeped upward into the body of the Sphinx around the time it was carved, eroding away the surface stone at the rate of 4 inches per century, and thereafter ceased eroding altogether as the water level continued to rise over the ensuing 4.5 millennia, for as Leonard insists, all weathering to the Sphinx had virtually taken place by the time of the earliest repair campaign.
Yeah.
It just seems strange that they don't notice these problems.
Well, that's not what's happening, bro.
Well, I mean, we got this other guy, Dr. Gari.
So
Yeah.
who funded his education?
He works for the Stone Conservation Place.
Right.
So West says, as I pointed out earlier, the agent responsible for weathering
but Leonard would have picked somebody. Like if he has an agenda,
Yeah.
he's not just going to pick some objective scientist to do the work. He's
Yeah.
going to pick somebody that he's sure is going to
Yeah.
turn over the results that he wants.
Yeah.
Full conspiracy.
Well, I think one of the things that's happening here, it seems like, is like you said about Bohr's paper.
Yeah.
There's the knowledge that very few people are going to read in depth the
Right,
paper, and they're
right.
just going to take its conclusions and cite it.
Yeah. And they've got this one annoying guy. John Anthony West
Yeah.
is like reading everything that they won't read.
Yeah,
And
it's like Randall does too.
Yes. So great.
Ricky reads everything, and it's really annoying to those kind of people.
Yeah.
not to us. Okay. So he says, as I pointed out earlier, the agent responsible for weathering the Sphinx was also responsible for weathering the mighty core blocks of the Valley Temple. On this basis as well, Dr. Gari's hypothesis must be rejected, since water seeping upward through capillary action cannot traverse the breaks in the individual courses of stone. Which is true. A capillary action will not continue through multiple blocks. You know, it'll seep up. A capillary action can conceivably take place in a single, edifice of stone. But if you have blocks sitting on top of each other, the capillary action stops.
Yeah.
It isn't going to continue to leach upwards. At least not normally. That would be an extraordinary circumstance. It would have to pool water on top of the course of blocks so that could then be
Right.
sucked up into the next
Yeah.
one. Yep. Okay. In other words, even if there were no commanding reason to disqualify Dr. Gari's theory when applied to the Sphinx, it would be disqualified on the basis of the erosion pattern on the Valley Temple, since the same weathering agent has to be responsible for both, and that agent cannot have been water leaching up from underground into the case in the case of the Valley Temple. A somewhat similar argument may be drawn from the erosion pattern found in the so-called mortuary temple connected to the Sphinx by the causeway, and also discussed at some length in my final chapter. This temple was built on the plateau more than 150 feet above the level of the Sphinx, but its erosion pattern is similar to that of the Sphinx, allowing for the rather drastic ravages resulting from its higher, more exposed position on the plateau. If water seeping up from underground were actually responsible for the erosion to the Sphinx, then that same water would have to have seeped still another 150 feet upward to weather away the mortuary temple. Also, it would have to have done so selectively, since it is only the mortuary temple amid the myriad mastabas and other structures built on the plateau in Old Kingdom times that displays that typical water erosion pattern. This is as inconceivable as the rest of the Gari-Linner hypothesis. So yeah, that mortuary temple is on the same level as many of those other Old Kingdom structures up there, and yet they don't show anything like that erosion. And if it was water leaching upwards, and you have to do that from the following, like, you know, if you've got 3 structures on the Giza Plateau that have that kind of weathering, the Sphinx and its enclosure, the Valley Temple, which is directly connected to the Sphinx, and then the Mortuary Temple, which is up high, up on the plateau. That's it. None of the rest of them have that kind of weathering.
And none of the rest of them are built with the same style.
Right, pretty much.
Except for the Assyrian.
Right. So they have this drastic weathering on them. Now, if they were built contemporary with all the other Old Kingdom structures up there, why don't the rest of them look like that?
Right.
So that's one problem. The next problem is how did that water get up 150 feet above the Sphinx? You would need a water fountain squirting out of the head of the Sphinx if that was happening.
Yeah. I just don't understand how capillary action can make the types of erosional patterns that are in the Sphinx enclosure. I haven't really looked closely at
it. Can't. It can't. Yeah. Because as we get into the later Schoch stuff, Schoch is like, no.
Yeah.
This is rainfall.
Capillary action, I would assume, especially in limestone, you have like, calcareous soil. It's like all this calcium, dissolved calcium.
Yeah.
In slow-moving water, it's depositing.
Yes.
And in capillary action is slow-moving.
Right. So this guy was saying it's the water interacting with the salts and cracking the rock open and stuff. That was what.
Okay. Well, I
Yeah.
don't know enough about it. I mean, I know just from, non-scientific observations around here in our limestone that wherever there's slow-moving water, there's like a buildup of rock.
Stuff. Yeah.
On the other rock.
Yeah.
And then where there's fast-moving water,
An
it's
accretion.
eroding away.
Yeah. There's an accretion in one place,
yeah.
an erosion in the other case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so slow-moving water moving up through the interior of the stone may not be accreting because it's a capillary action on the inside. But how can it be cutting the outside of the stone either? So this guy is saying, well, it's interacting with the quote-unquote salts in the stone.
Okay.
I lost my place. Okay. Moreover, over the course of several pages too technical and lengthy to quote, Linner puzzles over the provenance of the earliest repair campaigns carried out with large blocks typical of Old Kingdom masonry. He first postulates that the original Sphinx had a surface screed of such shaped blocks rather than a surface carved from the actual bedrock, the usual unspoken assumption. This might have explained the Old Kingdom style of these large blocks, but internal evidence, lack of rough quarrying marks on the actual surface of the Sphinx, forced him to reject this view. So basically there is like he was initially, because the quote-unquote earliest repair campaign blocks look like Old Kingdom masonry, which is when the Sphinx was supposed to have been built. So you can't have the first repair campaign happening when it was
after it was built.
So he was like, well, maybe they these exterior blocks were not a repair, but this is how it was initially made. It was made this way. But there are no quarrying marks indicating that that's what was being done. Basically, there was that quarrying marks plus other things was an indication that no, these blocks
was done way later.
Yeah, right. That these blocks are not part of the original structure.
Okay.
So that forces him to redate those blocks because normally anybody looking at them would be like, that's Old Kingdom masonry. Okay. So he says, however, to persist in attributing the early repair campaign to the Old Kingdom would have upset the standard attribution of the Sphinx to Cheprin, since all substantial erosion took place prior to the earliest repair campaign. Therefore, in order to preserve this standard attribution, he postulates a later New Kingdom repair campaign, even though archaeologically the masonry style is anomalous.
I'm trying to figure out, is this whole thing a farce? Like, is he pretending to wonder if it's possibly
right?
Old King? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I don't know. But it seems like what you were initially saying the first time we recorded the third segment was that they're just trying to they have this story.
The whole purpose is to bolster the story.
Yeah. So the story is set, and you can see this in the way he's doing his reasoning. Yeah. He's like, here's the story. We know this is true. That, principally, maybe he doesn't actually think that, but this is what he's saying.
Yeah.
Here's the story. We know this is true. The Sphinx was built by Cheprin, who was the son of Khufu. Okay. And so here's all the data. And this looks like Old Kingdom masonry. We can see that no erosion has happened to the Sphinx since this first layer of, quote unquote, the first repair campaign. This Old Kingdom looking masonry was put on there. So all the erosion to the Sphinx and that Old Kingdom masonry is not part of the original structure. It was added on. That's obviously that's obvious as well. So all the erosion to the Sphinx had to happen between the building of it and this stuff being added on. Now, this stuff looks like Old Kingdom masonry, but the problem with that is then you don't have any time for the erosion to take place.
Right.
So that means you have to push the date of the Sphinx being built back in order to give enough time for the erosion, even if it's only 500 years, which is still ridiculous.
Not gonna happen.
But that puts it before Cheprin.
Right.
And before Khufu, and actually all the way back into pre-dynastic times, so you can't do it.
Yeah, so like you were saying, the whole house of cards would come crashing
comes
down.
falling down. And then he would be asking himself, where are the potsherds? And he can't do that. It's not a question he can answer.
Yeah.
So even before Schoch shows up, I think John Anthony West is just showing that they're, and this is still, remember, this is still without them knowing. He's taken this other guy at his word that the water erosion was capillary action.
Right, yeah. He's just pointing out the inconsistencies in their arguments.
Yeah, well, maybe he's not taking him at his word because he's like, well, this temple way up here has the same erosion pattern.
Well, I mean, on the one hand, he's assuming their findings, certain of their findings are
scientifically accurate.
Right, and then basically saying their conclusions are inconsistent with the findings.
Right. But I think, to me, his pointing out about the mortuary temple 150 feet above is calling into question the guy's idea about the water erosion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, whoops. Uh-oh. So I didn't mark this. Yeah, okay, here we go. So Appendix 2. I didn't make any marks in this, so I'm just going to have to go through it. This is the one with Schoch. I think I didn't make any marks because I wanted to read the whole thing.
All right, go.
Sphinx update. He says, I can think of no major, valid, scientific or scholarly theory in place today that has not undergone a long process of development involving correction, winnowing, refining, and revision. The quest to redate the Sphinx is no different. Without a geological specialist to look into the details of the theory I'd pieced together, I could claim with assurance that the Sphinx had not been weathered by wind and sand. Even Gari and Linner were agreed on that point. By pointing out the glaring inconsistencies in the Gari and Linner report, I could present a solid case for overthrowing the attribution to Cheprin and for acknowledging the need to accept a much earlier date for its carving. If the science of geology had never been developed, or if reason and logic were determining factors in accepting or rejecting a theory, in principle, the new theory could have established itself without the need for outside expert help. But in real life, late 20th century, a geologically based theory needed geologists to confirm it before anyone within the academic establishment would take it seriously. This is not to be taken to mean that the academic establishment has a monopoly on scientific or scholarly truth in any sense, but without some sort of academic backing, the media will not involve itself. And without the media, it is extremely difficult to get a new idea or theory out to the mass audience. In 1989, a friend at Boston University aroused the interest of a geologist colleague, Dr. Robert M. Schoch. A stratigrapher and paleontologist, Schoch was a specialist in the weathering of soft rock, such as the limestone of the Giza Plateau. He had exactly the kind of expertise needed to confirm or rebut the theory once and for all. There are thousands of geologists, but only a dozen or so sufficiently specialized in these areas to pass authoritative judgment on the theory's various elements. That's interesting right there.
Yeah.
Though Schoch could readily see the holes in the Linner and Gari explanation, and though my photographs looked to his practiced eye like typical water weathering, he was still deeply skeptical, mainly because it looked too obvious. Schoch found it difficult to believe that in 200 years of studying, excavating, and restoring the Giza Plateau, no one prior to Schwaller had noticed that the weathering on the Sphinx was water weathering, and no one prior to me had noticed that this was peculiar to the Sphinx and its immediately associated structures. His initial conviction was that, as an amateur, I must have overlooked some crucial piece of evidence that would follow the accepted dating and would allow the accepted dating and attribution to stand. That was Schoch's initial stance there.
Yeah.
A brief, informal inspection trip to Egypt in June of 1990 provisionally convinced Schoch otherwise. There was no doubt in his mind that the Sphinx had been weathered by water. The pattern of weathering was such that it could not have been water leaching up from underground, as Linner and Gari were claiming, but it also wasn't the flood water that I had been postulating. According to Schoch, the weathering was typical precipitation-based. In other words, rainwater was responsible for weathering the Sphinx, not floods. This turned out to be the one serious mistake I had made in putting together my own argument, but it answered a major reservation that had been nagging me from the beginning. The geological literature I had used to develop the theory talked about immense floods in Egypt over the long millennia following the breakup of the last ice age and prior to the Sahara becoming desert. This seemed to me to be the only plausible source for the water that had weathered the Sphinx. The problem is that the Sphinx is deeply weathered up to its neck. This necessitated 60-foot floods at a minimum over the whole of the Nile Valley.
Yeah.
It was difficult to imagine floods of this magnitude. Worse, if the theory was correct, the inner limestone core blocks of the so-called mortuary temple at the end of the causeway leading from the Sphinx had also been weathered by water, and this meant floods reaching to the base of the pyramids another 100 feet or so of floodwater.
160-foot floods.
Yeah. A number of critics had ridiculed that idea, though without ever addressing the anomalous weathering in the first place, or any of the other supporting pieces of evidence I put together. That's typical right there. Precipitation-induced weathering took care of the problem in a single stroke. The sources I was using for reference talked about these floods in conjunction with long periods of heavy rains, but it hadn't occurred to me as a non-geologist that the rains, rather than the periodic floods, were the actual weathering agent. In retrospect, it would not have taken a major stroke of genius to make that connection myself. But nothing in the literature I had consulted triggered it. Since dozens of scholars, including geologists, had devoted whole lifetimes to the Sphinx and pyramids, and none, prior to Schwaller, had ever even noticed that it was water weathering to begin with, nor that the weathering to the Sphinx was both striking and unique, unlike anything else man-made in Egypt, I confess that I wasted little time in self-recrimination. Unfortunately, without official access to the Sphinx enclosure, Schoch could not examine the limestone of the actual Sphinx firsthand. Privately, he was convinced, but publicly, a number of key questions had to remain open, pending an officially sanctioned examination. We had to be able to get up close to make absolutely certain the weathering was precipitation-induced. We also had to be able to say with certainty that the anomalous and unique weathering to the Sphinx was not a feature of anomalous and unique geology. In other words, if the Sphinx was carved from a different strata or type of rock than the rest of the plateau, that perhaps might account for its unique weathering pattern. Our public access vantage point just outside the Sphinx Hollow made this seem unlikely, but the possibility could not be dismissed. So Schoch was saying, like, well, you got to make sure that the rock isn't special somehow.
Yeah.
Okay. On the basis of Schoch's provisional professional support, a Sphinx team began to form. By this time, it was absolutely clear that establishing the Sphinx theory called for a master game plan. The actual science was only one factor. We also needed permission from the Egyptian Antiquities Organization to be allowed to do our work in the first place. The Giza Plateau is probably the most sensitive political/academic area in all of Egypt. Even with a theory much less incendiary than ours, it was difficult to get permission to work. Our financial backing had to come from private sources. And finally, since we could expect nothing but opposition from academic Egyptologists and archaeologists, a way had to be found to get the theory to the public, if and when Schoch decided the evidence warranted full geological support. Otherwise, it would simply be buried, possibly for good. We decided to record the ongoing work in a video documentary, which would have wide public appeal. With the backing of his dean, Schoch presented a proposal to carry on our work to the Egyptian authorities. Eventually, permission was granted. Creative shoestring financing underwrote the enterprise. He says Operation Desert Storm forced a postponement for a little while, but on April of 1991, we were prepared for our first official survey. We had two main objectives. The first, of course, was to determine, definitively if possible, if the water weathering theory held up on close inspection. The second, which followed, was to see if all the other pieces of the theory fit together. This required the expensive but indispensable services of a geophysicist and a state-of-the-art seismographic equipment. One objection thrown back at me by the establishment on those rare occasions when I could get any response at all was a question. How could the Sphinx be the only relic of this postulated vanished civilization? Of course, I had never said that it was. There had to be more. If the Sphinx predated the formation of the Sahara, other structures must be buried somewhere, probably deeper than anyone had looked previously. In mapping the subsurface geology, we hoped our seismographs would turn up something. Our team now included geophysicist Dr. Thomas L. Dobecki, an associate with a respected Houston firm, McBride, Ratcliffe and Associates, and unofficially an architect and highly skilled amateur photographer, two other geologists, and an oceanographer. An old friend, Boris Said, ex-race driver for Ferrari, ex-captain of the U.S. Olympic bobsled team, and now a producer of unusual documentary films, signed on to oversee the project. With legal access to the Sphinx enclosure, Schoch was swiftly dropping conditionals. The deeply weathered Sphinx and its ditch wall and the relatively unweathered or clearly wind-weathered Old Kingdom tombs to the south, dating from around Cheprin's period, were cut from the same member of rock. In Schoch's view, it was therefore geologically impossible to ascribe these structures to the same time period. Our scientists were agreed. Only water, specifically precipitation, could produce the weathering we were observing. Upon examination, the wall of the Sphinx ditch was even more crucial to our case than the much repaired and now partially covered over Sphinx. Only running water, coursing down the plateau and cascading over the walls of the ditch at low or weak spots, could have created those deep vertical fissures and scooped out those shallow scalloped coves. Preliminary readings of Dobecki's seismograph readings also produced tentative gold. We were picking up anomalies or cavities deep in the bedrock between the paws and along the sides of the Sphinx. In the area in front of the Sphinx, we found what appeared to be a set of deep channels or quarry features cut into the bedrock of the cliff that slopes off in front of the Sphinx temple. If eventually these proved to be man-made, it could be a major archaeological find. He says, we extended our inquiry into some of the pieces of corroboratory evidence I'd pieced together earlier, but which needed geological expertise to back them up. In Saqqara, 7 miles south of the Sphinx, there are mud brick royal tombs dating from First Dynasty Egypt. Mud brick royal tombs. Okay. First Dynasty. So older than the Sphinx, according to the official chronology. Made out of mud bricks.
Right.
The soft mud bricks are still in stable and recognizable condition. Was it possible that the limestone Sphinx could sustain 3 feet of weathering to its body, while a few miles away, the mud bricks in tombs supposedly older could still be used in construction today? Schoch thought not, and he was now willing to go on record that the Sphinx was older than dynastic Egypt. Because, if those mud brick structures are first dynasty, which is the beginning of Egypt.
They should be gone.
Or the Sphinx is older. Because,
But I mean, if the Sphinx is not older and it's got 3 feet of erosion.
And those are older than the Sphinx, they shouldn't be there.
Yeah, they should not be there.
Or they are in an anomalous place of no rain. It never rains there.
That's right.
Months later, Debicki's processed geophysical data turned up important new surprises. The limestone bedrock floor immediately behind the Sphinx showed only half the depth of weathering of the sides, approximately 4 feet in back and 8 feet along the sides. Since the stone of the floor is the same all around, and the sides and back have been subjected to identical weather conditions since dynastic times, Schoch and Debicki took this to mean but one thing: the back area of the Sphinx must have been cut out at a later date. I remember them talking about this on the documentary. Schoch was saying that once you've exposed a stone, then water weathering will actually change the structure of the stone, and the longer it's exposed to the water, the deeper that change goes.
Okay.
So in the back of the Sphinx, it's only about 4 feet down before that change stops. But along the sides and in the front, it's 8 feet.
Right. So they cut out more later.
Yeah.
On the backside.
Like the Sphinx initially was just sticking out of
okay.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And then later they cut it out and made the back actually separate.
Back of the body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Nothing else would account for the difference in weathering depth. Given the Old Kingdom style of the earliest repairs and the near certainty that the pharaoh Shepren was intimately connected with the Sphinx as an early restorer, it seemed fair to postulate that this rear portion had been cut no later than Shepren's time, some 4,500 years ago. If the bedrock had weathered down approximately 4 feet in 4,500 years, this meant that the deeper weathering along the sides had taken commensurately longer. This evidence provided Schoch with hard quantitative data to support his geological diagnosis. Now he could put forward a very tentative date for the carving of the Sphinx, 5,000 to 7,000 BC as minimum. Minimum must be stressed since weathering does not proceed in a linear fashion. As weathering gets deeper, it goes slower, since it's protected by the rock on top. Moreover, for reasons too complex to broach here, it is conceivable that Shepren was not the first restorer of the Sphinx either. Here, Schoch and I disagree, or rather interpret the same data somewhat differently. Schoch very deliberately takes the most conservative view allowed by the data. Over the past couple of decades, there has been a general archaeological revision and upgrading of our opinions on the civilizations that flourished between 10,000 BC and the rise of the civilizations of Egypt and Mesopotamia around 3,000 BC. Jericho, dating back to 8,000 BC, already featured massive stone walls. Catalhoyuk in Anatolia shows fully fledged, sophisticated city cultures. The hunter-gatherer Neolithic image for this long period has been much revised. Schoch thinks it's possible that the Sphinx was produced by an Egyptian equivalent of these cultures. Even though the Sahara was already desert by this time, it was not as dry as it was in dynastic Egyptian days, and there were periods of increased rainfall during these millennia. Schoch thinks it's possible that these rains may have weathered the Sphinx.
Yeah, I would say typically conservative dating of in geological terms would be the longer date, like the older date.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, he's talking about conservatively in terms of archaeology.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree.
He went the other direction
Yeah.
for this particular example because there's archaeology involved.
Right. All right. Last little bit here. However, I remain convinced that the Sphinx must predate the breakup of the last ice age. The technology involved in the Sphinx and its adjacent temples is of an exponentially higher order than anything in Catalhoyuk or Jericho. If technology of that order had been available in Egypt, I think we'd see evidence of it elsewhere in the ancient world. The drastic precipitation induced weathering and the fact that, as our opponents interminably point out, we don't have evidence of anything else from the Sphinx era makes me think that the more outrageous scenario is actually the more plausible one. The missing other evidence is perhaps buried deeper than anyone has looked and or in places no one has yet explored, along the banks of the ancient Nile, perhaps, which is miles and miles from the present one.
Oh, man. Love to take some GPR out there.
Or even at the bottom of the Mediterranean, which was dry during the last ice age. If the Sphinx was as recent as 5,000 to 7,000 BC, I think we would probably have other Egyptian evidence of the civilization that carved it. Only further research will solve this question.
I want to take GPR equipment out into the Sahara Desert.
Yeah. And laser everything.
Radar everything.
Yeah. But you can radar everything. I'll LiDAR everything.
Nice looking sand dunes. But seriously.
Yeah.
It's just,
Sitting there.
it might be hard to get access into these already discovered.
Yeah, but no one's going to care.
No one's
in the
going to
middle
care.
of nowhere in the
go
desert.
out in the middle of the desert, find where the ancient Nile was, and just start GPR. And
Yeah.
come on, man.
Yeah.
Who wants to go?
Let's do it. Snake Bros, Snake Force, unite.
Yes.
All right, so there's more in this book. I didn't even read that entire second appendix, and there's a third one where he talks about the problems with that he actually felt like. So the third appendix, he actually felt like things were going backwards in terms of, he was like, the public loved the documentary that they put out. Loved it, right? Which is true. But academically, it made it worse. They're even more unlikely to take up the argument now because they feel affronted by this, by them going around them and putting it out to the public. And now archaeologists are always getting asked if the Sphinx has Atlantis underneath it, and they're just anyway. So I recommend.
You just want to do that in the beginning of the next show or something?
What?
Those other appendices.
Oh yeah, I guess we can. I was just going to say everybody should get the book.
Yeah.
There's more in that second appendix, and then there's the third one. And he's got all this. He talks about bringing the police artist out there and comparing the face of the Sphinx to the.
I'm trying to remember what that guy's called. What the profession is, where they identify people.
Yeah,
They facial recognition.
The thug
stuff.
artist.
I was thinking it'd be cool that to take modern, and any of you Snake Bros, Snake Force, Snake Sister people out there, you could do this. I probably won't do it, but I could. But take modern facial recognition technology, and just use it on the Sphinx and what is it? Who is it supposed to be? Khafra? Sheprin.
Yeah, Cheprin. However you say
they're trying to claim that that's his face.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, it's clearly Cheprin.
Right. Back then, they did somebody, I don't know who it was, some Egyptologist did this comparison with a computer, and it was very...
That was Leonard.
Leonard just basically took one photo and just sort of overlaid it on the other one or something. It was just like, okay, analysis done. It's the same guy.
Yeah.
And then John Anthony West got the what is the Watcher? Sketch artist.
Yeah, he's a sketch artist, but he's
not there's something about identifying facial features.
Yeah, he's a profile. He makes profiles from people's descriptions.
Yeah. So anyway, John Anthony West got that guy, and
forensic artist.
Yeah, there you go. And he was just like, no,
Frank Domingo. Yeah. New York Police Department.
Obviously by the name.
Yeah.
Frank
His
Domingo.
name is Frank Domingo. Yeah.
But yeah, he was just like, no, it's not the same. There's all kinds of like features of the face that are too different.
Especially when you look at the profiles.
Yeah.
Cheprin's face, he's got this brow, and then his nose is out here, and then his chin goes in. But the Sphinx from the side, the brow is farther back than anything else. The nose is farther out, and the chin is farther out.
Yeah, and he's saying it's like
it's called a
sub-Saharan
sloping
African or
yeah, it's a
whatever.
sloping type of face. The mouth is the most protruding thing from the profile of the Sphinx.
Yeah.
Now the nose the nose is gone, but if it were still there, but you can see that the face slopes outward as
Yeah.
opposed to Cheprin's, which is rounded at profile.
Yeah. But anyway, facial recognition software.
Facial recognition
Come on,
software,
folks.
yeah.
Get two photos. Just get two phones.
See if Facebook calls the Sphinx Cheprin after you identify the Cheprin statue as Cheprin.
Oh, is Facebook doing
Facebook has some of the best facial recognition software.
Oh.
You know how it can see your face. It's like, boop, is this Kyle in any photograph?
Oh, that's a good call. Dude.
So tag Cheprin statue in Facebook.
Snake Force. Get her done.
Yeah.
Let's see the results.
Yeah. So you just
Try to make it happen.
find a bunch of pictures of Cheprin statues and post them and tag them as Cheprin. This is Cheprin, and then post Sphinx and see if it tags it as Cheprin. It won't.
It's genius.
Case closed. Facebook says.
That'd be a great.
Yeah, it'd be a great experiment. Facebook group guys can do it.
Yeah. All right. You guys can get a hold of us at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. Send us an email, brothersoftheserpent.com. Check out the website. Oh, wait. I already said that.
Did you?
No, I said the email first, and then I said it again. Check out the website. I don't remember which one I did.
Start at the top.
Brothersoftheserpent.com. Go to the encyclopedia and the glossary of terms. Check out the snakeskins. Check us out on Twitter at Snake Bros, SNKBRS. Snake Bros, no vowels.
That's right.
Share the shows. Donate to the Pyramid Scheme. Write reviews. Check out History Shifts blog. Thanks for making all of our YouTube videos. Check us out on YouTube.
That's right. Go to Facebook. You look us up on Facebook. Check out Poddoodle.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks to, I want to give a shout out to Soraya. Where did the road go? We were getting so many people coming from his links to us from his website. Thanks so much for that. What else? Oh, yeah. Library of the Serpent.blogspot.com. Check that out, too. Run by Jeff.
Bitmovio.
Go to a Bitmovio and we get paid. Somehow. Thank you guys so much. We love you.
Always have. Thanks to everybody who's donated to the show.
That's right.
Value for value.
Always will.
All of the hard work. Love it.
Yep. Where's the set?
Get back to work.
Yeah.
That's the best show I ever did.